Everyone, it is 12 o'clock noon, so we're going to start right on time. My name is Lana Johnson. I would like to welcome everyone to our exclusive job seeker webinar from Advanced Resources. And our topic today is how to make a good first impression at your interview. And so hopefully by the end of this session, it won't just be a good first impression, it'll be a great first impression. Like I said, I'm your speaker, Lana Johnson. To introduce myself, I have been with Advanced Resources actually for 20 years. I celebrated my 20th anniversary this past summer, and I've played a lot of different roles in the organization, including an awful lot of time working with our clients and working with our candidates, working with hundreds of clients in their quest to obtain talent and working with hundreds of candidates. I've interviewed just hundreds of candidates. So I feel really qualified to be your speaker today and to talk with you on this topic. I definitely consider myself an expert in the industry. Today, I am our Director of Marketing, and I have been for the last 5 years. And I certainly invite all of you to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can easily look me up, and I'm also on Twitter. My handle is @LanaPJ. So thank you so much for allowing me to chat with you today. And if you don't already, if you haven't already participated in one of our webinars, just a few housekeeping details. First of all, all of our attendees have been muted, and that's not because we don't want to hear from you, but we want to minimize any background distractions for your fellow listeners. I will take questions, and I will answer them at the end so that we can keep the flow of the webinar going, but you can enter your questions at any point in time throughout the webinar using the question functionality of GoToWebinar. And I'll circle back at the end to answer those questions. The session is being recorded, and we will have a copy of the recording or a link to the recording and a link to the slides sent to you via email within 48 hours after the session has concluded, and then we will also post those links on our website along with the other 14 webinars that we have conducted. So we definitely encourage you, if you haven't listened to our previous webinars, to check those out. And then finally, I hope as your speaker to provide value for everyone. I'm sure on this conversation today that we have some people who are at the early stages of their career, and we probably have some people who are seasoned career professionals. And I hope that everyone can walk away with at least one idea to help you achieve greater job search success. If you don't already know about Advanced Resources, just really briefly about our company, we are one of 4 companies that make up the Advanced Group. So we have ourselves, and we specialize in placement for HR, technology, accounting, healthcare, and office support professionals. Our sister company is Advanced Clinical, and they specialize in staffing and outsourcing for the clinical research and pharmaceutical industry. We have Wonderland, who's a marketing and creative staffing firm, and then we have Advanced RPO, formerly known as Triworth, and that is our outsourcing business. Advanced Resources is located in 5 geographic areas: Chicago, Northbrook, Downers Grove, and Schaumburg, here in Illinois, and then we, this summer, opened our first office outside of the Chicagoland area in New York City. We have 5 specialties, which I already mentioned. We have been in business for 28 years, so we are a very established staffing agency, and then we really do focus on insights such as our session today, delivering results for our clients and candidates, and really doing everything with excellence. We are, one last bit about us, we are Chicagoland's top award-winning staffing firm. So we have been recognized as an employer of choice. We're most proud of our Best of Staffing award that we have won for 6 years in a row now, based upon feedback from our clients and from the candidates that we've placed. So that's enough about us. Let's get down to business, our session today, and talking about how to make a great first impression on your interview. We're going to do 4 things. We're going to talk about why first impressions matter. So why should we even be talking about this today? And it seems common sense, but we'll talk about it a little more. I'm going to give you 8 pointers for making a great first impression. I'll finish up with a couple of closing thoughts or additional thoughts, and then if we have some questions, I'll take them at the end. So let's dive right in. Let's talk about why first impressions really matter. So you are really making a first impression throughout the job search process. So I'll talk here about before the interview, after the interview, or during the interview, and then after the interview. So obviously before the interview, you're making an impression via your resume and how well your resume reads and how it looks, how well it matches the position, how easily it flows through a company's applicant checking system. So your resume certainly makes an impression. Your cover letter or your cover email makes a very strong impression as well in terms of being the vehicle that introduces a recruiter or a hiring manager to yourself and who you are. And then finally, of course, you're making a first impression during the phone screen. And many companies conduct a phone interview before they bring you in for a face-to-face interview. And this is actually a webinar that we did conduct this year, How to Shine on Your Phone Interview. So if you haven't listened to that one, you should be sure to check it out because there's a lot of really great information. You are obviously making an impression during the interview. You're making an impression in terms of how well you answer the interviewer's questions, the effectiveness and the strength of the questions that you are asking. And we always advocate strongly for the fact that as a job seeker, you should come prepared with questions that you want to ask. You make an impression based upon the connection that you make during the interview with the interviewer, and then how well you fit the company culture and the team environment. And then, of course, you are continuing to make an impression even after the interview is concluded via the thank you note that you send. And then if you conduct any follow-up, if they tell you, if you haven't heard from us in a week, then check back in. So how effectively you do that also makes an impression. Today, however, we're going to talk about the impression that you make in the first 10 minutes of your face-to-face interview. And so you might say, oh my gosh, the first 10 minutes, are they crazy? There's so much more to talk about before, during, and after. But we are going to focus in on the first 10 minutes, and here's why. The first 10 minutes really matter. So hiring managers often know whether they might hire someone soon after the small talk is done. So hiring managers, literally, a survey was conducted, and the feedback from executives and managers who do a lot of hiring was that they know in the first 10 minutes, they have a gut reaction as to whether or not someone's going to make it through the process and be hired for their company. So the interview starts the moment that you arrive. So you might feel like your interview begins once you sit down and they start asking you questions and you answer their questions. But the interview began several minutes ago, really from the second that you set foot in the building, and to some degree, even before you left your house. The opening minutes set the tone for the rest of the discussion. So for instance, if you arrived right when your interview is supposed to start and you were running late and you're flustered and you're rushed and you feel frantic, and that tone comes across, it's very difficult to recover from that initial outset of your interview. And so those first opening minutes really do set the tone. The hiring manager is considering way more than what you say. And so perhaps you have read some of the very popular documentation, articles, whatever, that just really reinforce the fact that a lot of communication, a lot of what takes place between two people is nonverbal. It is physical cues and how you look and so forth. And then they're considering how you present yourself. They're looking at not only just how you look, but your confidence level and how you really get yourself across. And then finally, the reality is we make judgments about people in a nanosecond. I mean, we do this, even personally with friends and with kids who are friends with our kids and with people that we meet in our communities and people that we meet at work. It's just human nature that we make judgments very quickly on people. And so this is why those first 10 minutes of your interview really matter, because your job as a job seeker, as a candidate, is to stand above from the other people who are being considered for the job as well. And so you want everything going in your favor. So why is this so important? Why did we dedicate a whole webinar to talking about making a first great impression, especially in those first 10 minutes? And really we decided to do this because we have found that making a great first impression is one part of the interview process that most people don't even plan for or even consider or think through. And, most people, if you've listened to our webinars, we talk about, how to shine on the phone screen and how to handle the toughest interview questions and how to follow up, how to write that thank you letter, what to do, ace the interview, land the job. But we've never really chatted about how do you really make that first great impression that can really impact your chances of getting the job, knowing that people make up their mind kind of subconsciously within those first few minutes. And so that's why we dedicated time to this topic today. So let's talk about 11 ways to make those 10 minutes work in your favor. The first thing, when I said that the process kind of starts sometimes even before you leave your house, is your mentality, and really checking in on your own mentality as you are approaching the time to go in for your interview. And I've, again, interviewed hundreds of candidates, and I have seen many people who are nervous about the interview, or many people who come to the interview feeling like, the interviewer or the hiring manager is the one in the dominant position, and you've got to really live up to their expectations, or you feel like you're desperate. Maybe you financially need a job, or maybe you just really want this job. It's your perfect ideal opportunity, and so you are really anxious to make a great first impression. But I think that, as with everything in life, how you're thinking about a situation is half the battle. And so in an interview, you are on stage from the minute that you enter the room. And so what we like to say is get yourself into character. And the character that we recommend that you try to be in your head is not the character of the anxious job seeker, but the character that we recommend is that of a problem solver. You're there as a problem solver. You know why you're there. You know what you're able to do. You are probably excited about the company, otherwise you wouldn't invest the time to go in and interview. And you know that you can help the company achieve their goals, whatever profession you might be in. So maybe if you're in sales and you are a successful salesperson and you're going in for an interview, you're there to help that company solve a problem. And for most companies who are hiring salespeople, the problem is they need to grow their revenue or capture market share. And if you're that salesperson, then you know how to do that. And so you have that confidence. And if you think of the interview as you coming in as a problem solver versus that anxious job seeker, it gives you that confidence, and it gives you a mentality that helps you really kind of calm yourself down and look at the situation perhaps in a different perspective versus if you were not so much desperate, but just anxious about the opportunity. So speaking of being anxious, we've talked to a lot of people who are nervous before an interview, and I have even seen the most calm, cool, and collected people who never get their nerves rattled all of a sudden become nervous when they are in an interviewing situation. And so we recommend that you take the time to really figure out how to calm your nerves. And again, even if you're a person who doesn't normally get nervous, if you're a super confident person, it's good to have a couple of techniques in your toolkit just in case you find all of a sudden that you do have those butterflies in your stomach before you go in for a job interview. So we've got 8 ideas here, and some of these might be relevant to you, and some of them might not be your style, but all of them have worked for somebody. And so based upon research that we've done, so that one really easy tactic is to just chew some like mint flavored gum, because the aroma and the taste, it just has a physical reaction. It calms down a lot of people. Just the motion of chewing helps distract you a little bit, helps you focus. That's why I've even read, like, for college students who are studying, chewing gum can help them focus and retain more. So if that's your thing, it could really work for you, but of course, make sure you spit it out before you go into the job interview. But the bonus here is, of course, you'll have nice, minty, fresh breath. Some people like to meditate, and so before they go into the interview, they like to take some time, perhaps in their car, and just have a few quiet moments to collect their thoughts or collect themselves, or to actually meditate, if that's your thing. For me, I like to take deep breaths, and so I'm an outgoing person, but when I need to do any type of public speaking, which I actually enjoy a great deal, I still find myself getting a little nervous. And what works for me is, even if I'm just sitting there in the audience waiting to go up and talk, just taking 5 or 10 just really deep, slow, calming breaths just really slows my body and my mind down a little bit. Trying aromatherapy, I had a person who recommended that as a way for people to calm their nerves if that's a thing that you're into. I think it is important, and I do this myself as well, to visualize yourself succeeding. So to think about, okay, this is how I want the interview to go, and I want to walk out of the interview, back up to my car or back onto the train, and I want to feel awesome. And so really visualizing yourself in that scenario and feeling that way. Stretching out a little, sometimes having a little bit of a physical movement, stretching your arms out or twisting your torso and just kind of moving around a little bit just loosens you up. And again, that physical movement can help kind of center your focus. A lot of people like to listen to music to calm themselves down before they go into a situation like a job interview. And then a really great tactic is to talk to a friend. I mean, I always advocate to job seekers when you're in a job search situation to have a support network, have friends or family members who can pump you up and who can help motivate you. And if that is something that really works for you, talk to them before you go into the interview, and they can give you that confidence and they can help you calm down. So these are ways to calm your nerves. Again, if you're a super confident person, it doesn't hurt to think about this in case you all of a sudden find yourself in a situation where you need to get rid of the jitters. The third thing is obviously to dress for success. And so again, this seems so obvious to us, I'm sure, but again, I have seen in so many situations where something that is very controllable, how you look when you go into an interview, candidates and job seekers stumble on this. And it is fairly basic. And there is some flexibility in this. If you are interviewing with an entrepreneurial startup technology company, coming in a gray pinstripe suit, really buttoned up and looking very professional and shiny, might not mesh well. And likewise, if you're interviewing with one of the big 4 accounting firms, very conservative, coming into interview in jeans knit and a sweater isn't going to work either. So you have to read your situation. But we give you some tips here for women and for men. Generally speaking, some standards for dressing for success. And really the goal is to put your best foot forward. What you really want is for your appearance and your attire and your grooming and your hygiene, just being honest, all those things to be distraction-free so that the interviewer's focus can stay on you and your knowledge, your skills, your ability, your presence, and how well you're going to fit the organization. So we don't want any distractions in how we look, which is why we recommend if you have lots of extra piercings or, whatever about your appearance that might be a distraction to the interviewer, you want to reduce or eliminate. And so dressing for success is a huge part of making that first impression. And, Advanced Resources is really active on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and we are also on Pinterest. And so we have a couple of thousand different ideas on Pinterest categorized in different ways to help job seekers, including some Pinterest boards that give suggestions for interview attire. So if you're ever looking for ideas, please feel free to come on over and check us out on Pinterest. The fourth tip also seems very obvious, but it is such a critical part of making a positive first impression. And again, I've had candidates who have arrived late. I've had candidates who arrive on time, but you can tell that they're rushing and they're disorganized. And this is something that 99% of the time is going to be in your control. Now, that 1% of the time that is out of your control. So you're driving to the interview on the Edens Expressway and there's a 5-car pileup and traffic is stopped for 2 hours. That's going to be outside of your control. If those situations occur, of course, you call from your car if you're able, or you text or you email if you're able, if you're stopped in traffic and it's safe to do so, and you handle the situation. But let's face it, 99% of the time, you are in control of your ability to get to the interview on time. And for me, for many people I know, being on time means that you're 10 minutes early. So again, when you get there 10 minutes early, you have the chance to sit down, collect your thoughts, slow down your heartbeat, and just really kind of get into the zone. But when you are arriving right on time, you know, you're kind of cutting it close. So we like to say 10 minutes early. It demonstrates to the interviewer that you are reliable and that you are respectful of their time. And so this is a very basic one, but it's one that you should never leave up to chance. The next tip that we have is to remember that your interview starts when you walk through the door. So you've walked into the office building and you go up to the receptionist, and this is your first interaction with the organization. And I'll give you a little tip here that a lot of hiring managers or a lot of interviewers and recruiters will come out to the receptionist after the interview has taken place, or they'll email the receptionist after the interview has taken place, whatever, and they'll ask for feedback. How were they? What did you think of them? How did you like them? It really happens quite a bit. And so you always want to be courteous to the receptionist. You always want to, you know, make sure that you're just making some slight small talk. There's a big difference between, hi, I'm Lana Johnson, and I'm here to see Rich Diaz. I have an appointment at 12. Versus, hi, how are you today? Now, my name is Lana Johnson. I'm here to see Rich Diaz. I know I'm a little bit early, but, you know, if you could let him know that I'm here, that'd be great. And so, and then, you know, how's it going today? Or making just some little small talk. You don't want to go overboard. You don't want to be obnoxious, flirtatious, whatever. But a warm smile and a warm greeting makes a great impression. And then when you're sitting down and waiting in the reception area, you want to stay professional. So this is not a place to, you know, whip out your phone and call someone and start chatting, or to start playing a loud video game on your phone, or not the place to kind of, you know, take off your coat, spread it out, whatever. You just want to be professional while you're waiting, and you want to kind of have everything ready to go. I mean, you don't, you know, when the interviewer comes out, you don't want to have to gather a bag and a purse and your portfolio and your coffee. You just want to be ready so that you again, get things off on the right foot. So speaking of getting things off on the right foot, the first thing you're probably going to do, if you haven't already done this with the receptionist, is you're going to meet your interviewer and you're going to shake hands. And so you want to have a strong handshake. And this is just kind of one of those age-old, tried and true philosophies about making a strong first impression, and that is having a good handshake. And I will say that, you know, handshakes and eye contact in some cultures, right, around the world, internationally, there are different protocols. But we're just going to talk about the good old U.S. today. And the reality is in the U.S. that a handshake matters. And so you want to keep your body facing the other person. You know, maybe a few decades ago it was proper etiquette for a woman to shake hands with someone who is standing, you know, while the woman was still sitting. But today, men, women, we stand up, we face the person, we shake their hand. If you have a drink, you want to make sure you have coffee or water that the receptionist gave you while you're waiting, whatever it might be. Of course, you want that in your left hand, so that your right hand is free. Your hands should be warm and dry. So maybe you are nervous and you have the good old sweaty palms. You want to be kind of wiping them on something to keep them dry. Or maybe you just use the restroom and you wash your hands. So you want to make sure your hands are really dry, because there's, you know, pretty big turnoff to shake someone's hand and it's all kind of wet. It's also like when your hands are cold, so try and rub them together, a nice, warm, firm, dry handshake. You want a strong grip that uses your whole hand. So strong grip should be firm, but not bone crushing. You don't want to hurt the other person. And I've shook hands with people before where they just kind of shake your fingertips. You know, you want to like get your whole hand in there. And then you just want to give a little, you know, shake the hand pump, like nice to meet you. And you don't want to be too vigorous with that, so you're like shaking this person's whole body. So a solid handshake really is a must. I mean, this is one of the biggest nonverbal cues that people talk about, is someone's handshake. And so, you know, you want to have a nice firm handshake. And it's one of those things that if you're not sure if you have a good handshake, you should probably ask someone in your little support circle to give you some feedback on it. Because it really can make a difference. It really does convey confidence and you know, just self-confidence and, you know, just it really does get across a little bit about who you are. The next thing is, of course, smiling. Again, this seems like a simple, straightforward thing, but if you pay more attention to it, I think it can really be beneficial. So when you smile, you use like hundreds of different muscles in your face. And we all know how great it feels when someone's smiling at us. And your smile comes across not just on your mouth and through your eyes, you know, they take on a little sparkle when you smile, but a smile really also comes through in your voice. You know, in our webinar about shining on your phone screen, we talk about smiling while you're on the phone because it really does convey enthusiasm and friendliness, and so you really want to make sure you've got a good smile on your face. And then about your voice, you want to make sure that you have a nice solid voice. And so again, some people who might be more introverted or more intimidated by an interviewing situation might have a voice that is softer or a little bit more timid. Some people, like me, when I get nervous, I tend to talk really fast and really loud. And so you want to be cognizant of that end of the spectrum as well. Smile while you talk, we talked about that. An important thing is to try not to use filler words, like saying a lot. So when people say a lot, it shows that you don't really have your thoughts together and you're not really sure. And then the other thing is the word like. I have seen a lot of younger people who use the word like so often that it like drives me crazy. So, you know, those are filler words. You want to try to avoid those, not just in the first 10 minutes, but actually all of the time. Too much upward inflection. So people end sentences and it sounds like they're kind of asking a question. That definitely conveys just a lack of confidence or nervousness or just coming across as maybe more immature or young. So if you tend to do that, just be cognizant of it. Speak with passion. You know, in those first 10 minutes, you're making a little bit of small talk and you really want to show some enthusiasm and passion. I've been doing a lot of research on your company. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. And that makes a difference. And it's probably very genuine and it comes across. Don't be afraid to use pauses. I was in a meeting the other day and I was listening to the person who was speaking or presenting and someone asked him a question. I was really impressed because he stopped, you know, before just kind of, you know, rifling an off an answer with a little bit of a thought-provoking question. And he took like 5 to 7 seconds and just paused and just thought through in his head the answer. And, you know, that 5 to 7 seconds went by really quickly. And so it doesn't hurt to pause and to, you know, when asks you a question, you want to think it through for a second. It doesn't hurt. And it also can slow you down if you are nervous. And then finally, the last thing is to breathe. And so I don't know if you've ever had that experience of when you're talking a lot and you just run out of breath. I've had this happen many times, you know, so that's kind of a really nerve-wracking situation to get into. So make sure that you're taking some good breaths along the way and kind of keeping your pace. The next tip, again, seems very obvious, but this is another one that you'd be surprised at how often it can trip people up, is to have good eye contact. And so again, we're trying to find, you know, we're trying to connect with the interviewer. We're trying to be memorable and we're trying to stand apart from the other people who are competing with us for the same job. And eye contact makes a huge difference in how we build relationships with people, especially when we're meeting them for the first time. So when you have good eye contact with somebody, and I'm not talking about the kind of eye contact where you stare at them into their eyes and you don't blink and you kind of creep them out. That certainly isn't going to help you land the job. But I'm talking about, you know, effective eye contact really conveys interest and it displays trust. I'm sure, like myself, you've probably met people who just can't seem to look you in the eye. You know, I can tell, I have small children, I can tell when they're lying to me because they won't look at me right in my eyes. And so when we have solid eye contact, it conveys trust, which is something that is a very positive thing to be building in a brand new relationship. Shows that you're paying attention. And so if you're kind of like looking around the room and you're looking at your fingers or looking at your hands while the other person is talking, it will give off a signal that you're not paying attention and that you're not listening to what they say. And not only could that damage the relationship that you're trying to form, but it could help you miss out on important information that you need to know about the job or the process or about the company. So, you know, when you focus in on someone's eyes and making eye contact, it really does force you to listen to what they're saying. Shows that you're willing to engage, that you're self-confident, that you're friendly. And then there, you know, if you do struggle, if you are shyer and you do struggle with having strong eye contact, you could go to Google, and there are so many articles on different techniques that you can use to improve your eye contact. And one thing that I saw that I really like is called the triangle technique, where if you don't want to like look a person right in the eyes, you could just be looking at them and look at one eye for a couple seconds, look at the other eye for a couple seconds, look at their mouth for a couple of seconds. And the person can't tell that you're looking at their whole face, but it comes across as having good eye contact. So anyway, that's one idea that we have found. The next tip, tip number 9, is to find a way to connect. And so you've got these first 10 minutes, and again, now we know these 10 minutes are super important. You want to find a way to connect. And if you have listened to our previous webinars, you know that we absolutely advocate for the fact that you have to do research and do your homework before you go on an interview. And one of the things you need to research is the person that you're meeting with. So LinkedIn makes this so easy to do. Even doing a simple Google search can tell you potentially a lot about the interviewer. But you really want to find some way that you can establish a personal connection with them. And so these personal connections can be, if you've done your research, you might find that the interviewer went to the same university that you went to. You might find that the interviewer just wrote an article for a magazine, and you can read that article and you can reference it as you're making small talk and settling in. You might find that the interviewer worked at the same company in his or her past that you have worked at. You might find that the interviewer's kids go to the same school as your kids. So you can learn a great deal by going online and conducting even the most basic amount of research. And when you can make a connection with someone in those first few minutes, it really can be conversational gold. And so how that could play out, I'll give you a couple of examples. You might say, I saw that you published an article in Workforce magazine about technology and human resources in 2017, and I found it just so interesting. I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about it later. So wow, that shows right there, you've done your research, you read the article, you are up on important topics in your industry, and it's very complimentary and probably a nice stroke to the interviewer's ego that you read his or her article. You might say something like, I noticed that you spoke at the SHRM conference or at the HR Tech conference, and I was at the conference a couple of years ago, and I learned so many fabulous things about applicant tracking systems, whatever it might be. And then even on personal levels, hey, I noticed that you went to the University of Illinois, and I went there as well. How about that great new football coach we have? And of course, their coach isn't that good right now. But anyway, you can see how finding just one little thing that you can make a personal connection on just eases you into the conversation. And it also will help the interviewer remember you after the interview is over and after they're thinking through who they want to move forward in the process. Our 10th tip is to engage and to be engaging. And so most think when they're going into an interview, I am the smartest person in the job, or I'm the best salesperson on the planet. I'm really going to show them what I can do. And the reality is your job is to dazzle them with your knowledge or with your background or with your skills. But what you really want to do is create a memorable conversation. You want to create a connection. You want to have that good vibe, and you want them to feel good about you as a candidate. And so, you really want to try and connect and to be engaging and to create an engaging dialogue. And so you want to try and draw out the interviewer, if they're being quieter, ask some good thought-provoking questions and try and get that dialogue going. You definitely want to listen very carefully to what they say. So you have to be a good listener when you're interviewing. You can ask thoughtful, open-ended questions that engage them in the conversation. You know, some of these, I gave these examples here on the slide, and technically if you did your research, you should already know the answers to some of these questions, but just for the sake of example, as you're creating small talk, you could ask questions like, how long have you worked here? How long have you been in this position? Or, you know, how is business going this quarter? Even a question as simple as, how is your week going? You know, just trying to get a little bit of a dialogue and a connection going can make a big difference in just engaging and really feeling that connection. And then the last tip, we're going to finish here with a really important one. And again, getting back to the concept of nonverbal cues being so important in communication, and that's the concept of body language. And so you really want to portray comfort and confidence through how you stand, how you sit, the posture that you have, and how, you know, how you're positioned as you're listening to the interviewer talk. And so all of these things can really make a difference. So obviously sitting up straight, standing up straight, and I say these things are obvious, but I even catch myself, you know, saying, gosh, sit up straighter. So, and it does, you feel better when you're really embracing good posture. You have a little boost of energy or something. So anyway, sitting up straight. When you walk, you know, walk in with your chest and your head held high. You don't kind of walk in kind of slumped over or slow. When you're sitting in the interview, when you're getting settled in those first 10 minutes, don't fidget. You know, sometimes people are like tapping their foot, or I have seen a lot of women, and sometimes I have this habit of tucking my hair behind my ears while I talk, or, you know, kind of touching your face. So don't fidget. If you need to like fold your hands together in your lap, then do that. Anything to keep yourself from fidgeting. Definitely don't sit there with your arms crossed, or don't stand there with your arms crossed. That's a position that we normally assume when we're blocking somebody else off or when we're angry. So you don't want to cross your arms. You also don't want to cross your legs. And I've had people say that's interesting because a lot of people cross their legs. But when you uncross your legs, you sit with your legs uncrossed, it kind of opens up your whole posture. And so you don't want to cross your legs. Try and keep your legs and even your feet uncrossed. Leaning in as you're listening, you know, you're sitting way back in your chair and there's all this distance between you and the interviewer that feels like a wide distance. But while they're talking, you're leaning in, you're nodding to show that you're listening to what they're saying. Sometimes even like tilting your head. I mean, not overthinking it, but again, that posture that shows that you're engaged. Using your hands confidently and appropriately. So this is one I'm extremely guilty of because I'm Italian and I talk with my hands, and my whole family makes fun of how much I talk with my hands. So you have to strike a happy medium between using your hands to help make a point and not using your hands at all. So you want to find that good happy medium to use your hands in a way that helps you, again, make that great impression. Relaxing your shoulders. So a lot of times we can get kind of hunched up when we're nervous. And so just really, again, kind of lifting up your head and your chest and just relaxing your shoulders. And then mirroring your interviewer. So after I've given you all of these tips about body language, if your interviewer is very introverted and not animated whatsoever, and they're sitting back and they seem more reserved, then obviously you want to try and mirror and match that a little bit. You don't want to be all over the place with your body language. And then likewise, if you are meeting with someone who is very animated and who seems very open with their body language and so forth, then you want to try and mirror that too and not be so stiff and rigid. So your body language really sends off quite a few cues. So let's summarize. Let's go over our 11 tips. We started with your mentality check. So your attitude, the things that you're saying to yourself in your head, and the character that you feel like you're going to play when you go into the interview. Either you're going to be that anxious job seeker, or you're going to be that confident problem solver there to solve the company's problems. The second thing is calming your nerves. Even if you are the most confident person, still having a couple of techniques that'll work for you if you find yourself feeling nervous. Dressing for success, thinking through how you're going to put your best foot forward visually through your appearance. Always being on time, which means being 10 minutes early. Impressing the receptionist and being professional while you're waiting. Projecting confidence with your voice and through that warm smile. Having an awesome handshake that creates a good first impression and again shows your confidence. making great eye contact so that you can start to establish a connection and trust and to show that you're friendly, finding something in common with the interviewer to give you a little bit of a personal connection to set the tone for the rest of the interview, to engage with the interviewer and to really try and get a great dialogue going versus an interrogation, if you will, and to be engaging and to really create that, that engagement creates a connection that makes you memorable. And then finally, being aware of your body language and overall the nonverbal cues that you are giving off when you're in those first 10 minutes. So what if you make a mistake? It is sure to happen, even to the most skilled, calm, cool people who've got it all nailed down. Everyone slips up once in a while. And so maybe you couldn't help it, and maybe you got there just barely on time, or maybe you stumbled over some words, or maybe you said something kind of silly as you were trying to make a personal connection. It happens to the best of us. So just a few things to remember. First of all, try to recover. So if you have done something, and if you're able to kind of rein it back and get it back on track, try to do that. But then to be humble. So if you say something that was kind of silly, I'm not really certain why I said that. What I meant to say was this, so just try and be humble. We are all human, and the interviewer has been interviewed his or herself. So make light of yourself. So gosh, that was kind of I dropped my pen, or I dropped something and say, I'm not really certain why I did that. I feel so clumsy today, whatever. And then don't beat yourself up about it. Don't leave the interview thinking, gosh, I really blew it. I do that, I'm so silly. Don't beat yourself up about it, but instead learn from it and try to do better the next time. And then finally, just to wrap up, a few reminders. These tips can actually apply in any situation, not just the first 10 minutes of when you're in an interview, but any of these tips could apply maybe at a networking event and meeting new people who could be valuable connections in your job search. But the fact is that learning how to make a memorable impact in just a few minutes can be a very powerful tool. So you might be in a situation where you don't have an hour for the interview. You've only got maybe 5 minutes to make a great impression on someone. Maybe you're at your son or daughter's sporting event, football game, volleyball game, whatever, and you find out that one of the parents works at the company that you're interviewing with, and you don't know them very well. So this, again, is an opportunity to make a positive impression so that maybe they would be willing to vouch for you with the hiring manager and in your desired target company. And then finally, above all, really letting your best self shine through. You really want to always be authentic, and through all of these 11 tips, you definitely don't want to give off the impression that you're trying to be someone who you're not. So it is important to always be yourself. And so now I'm just going to go ahead and go look at some of the questions that we have. So one of the questions, this is a good question. What recommendations do you have for posture and poise if you are an overweight candidate? So, so that is a really good question. So I think that the best thing to do, is I would maybe even go online and Google this type of question. But one thing I would do is to either to try and get an understanding of how you look and how your posture is. And so either by having someone videotape you, or really looking in the mirror and trying techniques for posture and for poise. I think the first thing is just to get that self-awareness of how do I come across, and then to experiment and try and find ways that can get you to where you want to be. And so that's a good question, and you can send that question a number of different ways, like if you have a disability, whatever, or to have people give you feedback, on okay, how could you look a little bit better? But I think really the first step is trying to get that self-awareness of how you do come across, and then doing some experimentation. Is it a good idea to remind the employer that you previously worked for them? Well, that's an interesting question. If you are interviewing with the company that you worked for before. First of all, a lot of companies should already know that. A lot of companies check to see, or on the application, there's usually a space where it says, have you ever worked for this company before? And most human resource departments would be looking at that to see if you're eligible for reemployment at the organization. But I think that the answer to this question really depends upon your individual situation. So if you worked at that company before and you left on very good terms, maybe you decided to stay at home and raise your family, or maybe your wife got relocated and you had to move. But if you left on great terms, absolutely it's positive to bring up the fact that you had worked at the organization before. If you left the company on not so good terms, either for a cause, terminated for cause, or whatever the situation might be, or if you're not really certain if it's going to be in your favor, then you might not bring it up. Again, the company should have done their homework, and they should know whether or not you've been there. But if it's not going to be something that helps your cause and moves you forward in the process, then I would probably not highlight the fact that you had been there before. So I think that one really depends on the situation. I never follow up because it is difficult to obtain the interviewer's contact information. Okay, so this is interesting because normally an interviewer should give you their contact information. Just I think proper protocol at the start of any kind of a business meeting to exchange business cards or what have you. So, we always advocate in our other webinars and in the counsel that we give to our job seekers that, there's a professional way to wrap up an interview. So if you've had your conversation and you were, allotted 45 minutes for the interview, and 45 minutes has come and it's time to wrap things up, we have a little, 4 steps that you should take in closing out the interview professionally. And one element of that is confirming what the next steps are. So making sure that you know. And so, so if the interviewer says, we're going to be back in touch with all the candidates within 2 weeks to, let you know who we're bringing back, and 2 weeks has gone by, you should have the opportunity to call or to email and say, you had mentioned it would be 2 weeks, and I'm, just checking in. And the other really important reason that you want to have their contact information is so that you can send a thank you note. That's a must after the end of every interview, to send a thank you note, thanking the interviewer for their time and just reiterating and reinforcing why you're the perfect candidate for the job. So I would make it a point to make sure that you do get their contact information. Even if you didn't get their contact information, you could always potentially find them on LinkedIn, and you could message them through LinkedIn, with a thank you note or with some professional follow-up. So I think that would be, if you haven't received their contact information, if you don't have their email, then the next advice I would give is to look to LinkedIn and to message them through LinkedIn and follow up if you have the chance. What do you do when your interviewer is less experienced or less informed on the roles and scope than you are? And so so I'm not implying I am smarter, but I have experienced this due to the age and experience level of the interviewer. And so, wow, that's a great question, because a lot of times, in human resources, entry-level recruiters are just that. They're entry-level. They can often be junior, and even hiring managers. If you are a more seasoned career professional, it's very likely you might be interviewing with someone who's younger than you. And I think that what you just have to do is, it's more challenging, but you still have to try and find a way to make that connection in a way that is going to put you in a positive light and to again leave that positive impression. So you definitely don't, you need to be cognizant that you're not being condescending, but you still want to get across the fact that you do have experience that's going to matter in the job. So in these situations, I call these the recruiter dynamic situations where, it's a little bit more difficult to connect with the recruiter, is to really stay focused on why you're a fit for the job, and to not let the fact that, that this recruiter is so much younger than you perhaps intimidate you or bother you or stand in the way, but definitely to just be cognizant of the dynamic. So you don't want to say things like, oh gosh, you know, when I was your age, this is what I was doing, or, you know, you might not know about this because you're newer to the industry. I mean, you would want to be cognizant of comments like that, obviously. But I think really just stay focused on why you're fit for the job, and you should increase your chances of success, hopefully. Okay, let's see. When asked a personal question, for instance, how would you handle? And you respond by saying, I would or I did. You are answering the question being asked, but you overhear the interviewer saying, she kept saying I. How would you interpret that? I'm not totally certain I understand this question. What I think is if you're being asked what we call a behavioral question. And so behavioral interviewing techniques are really common, and what they are is, instead of asking, how many years have you done sales, or how familiar are you with, you know, Microsoft Excel, behavioral interview questions ask you to tell stories, to give specific examples of a time when you were in a certain situation. So an example of a behavioral question might be, tell me an example of a time when you had a very irate customer. What did you do to handle the situation, and what was the outcome? And so we have a technique that we recommend, and this is in our webinar that's called Ace the Interview, Land the Job, but it's called the STAR technique. And the STAR technique stands for situation, task, action, result. And so you give your answer in a way that A, describes the situation. So what was the problem? You know, why was the customer upset? And then you talk about the tactic that you took. You know, here's what I did, here's what I felt was important to be done. The action, you know, how did the customer respond? And then the results. Were you able to retain the customer's business? And what was the final outcome? And I think if you're really good at telling a story in that manner, then, you know, what you want to do is keep the interviewer focused on your abilities and not so much, you know, the fact that, well, I did this or I did that, but kind of tell a story and keep, you know, to get the interviewer focused on how you were able to handle a situation. And the other thing that I always say about behavioral type questions is sometimes the interviewer is not even really looking for what you actually did, but just how you answer the question. Because if you answer the question with a general response, such as, well, I think it's really important when you have an irate customer that, you know, what you should do is remember, the customer's always right. So that's a very general answer, and what that tells the interviewer is you haven't had that experience. You can't tell any stories because you haven't done it. And so, you know, so what you want to do is give a really good, like 2-3 minute little explanation of the story that shows how you handled that situation. Okay, let's see. How do you show your value when you are meeting with people in several different areas to find where you might fit? So that's an interesting question. I think when so maybe you're having exploratory conversations and you know, you're trying to figure out which department you should be working in or what have you. And I think the best thing is just to know the different areas, know the job, and then through how. Sorry, I just had a little interruption there on my end. You just keep your answers to the questions and keep the questions that you ask tailored to that specific area as much as you possibly can. So if you're meeting, you know, maybe with customer service and then next you're going to meet with inside sales, is to just try and get really in the zone of that department or in that area. And, you know, and you're probably trying to figure out where you want to fit in just as much as they're trying to figure out where you should fit in. So be a little selfish and make sure that you're getting a good understanding of each area too, so that you can, you know, really figure out what's going to be best for you. I hope that helps. Okay, how can you explain that you've been an FMLA for 1 year? Family and Medical Leave Act. So you've taken a leave of absence probably for a health reason or maybe for, you know, an ailing parent or what have you. And so this is a little bit tricky, right? Because if it involves a disability or something like that, there's certainly laws and regulations about what can be asked and, you know, and what have you. But let's say you've been on leave for a year to take care of an aging parent. or a sick spouse or something like that. And I think that the best thing is to explain the situation without really having to go into a lot of detail. I mean, you want to be honest. You certainly never want to, misrepresent what you've been doing for a year. But you also don't need to go into a lot of detail. So if I were in that situation, I know it's easy for me to say because I'm not in that situation, but I would probably just recommend, I have a technique that I call, give the vanilla response and then ask the question right away. So if it comes up and someone says, well, what was this leave about? To say, I had a family member who was very sick and I took care of them for a year, or, I had a condition and it required me to take some time off of work, but I have a clean bill of health and I've been approved to return to work and I'm happy to be here. And so, let me ask you this. Can you tell me a little bit about the culture on the team? So give a polite enough answer to satisfy the interviewer's curiosity about what happened, but you don't need to divulge a lot of details. I think you just need to give the confidence that you're ready to be back at work, that you're qualified for the job, and that let's stay focused on how you're a fit for the job. And so I think that that's one way, perhaps, that you could try to really keep the focus on how you're the best choice for the position versus other candidates. How do you know whether to send your thank you via email or mail? So we actually, we publish a weekly blog called Advanced Insights. And so if you're not a subscriber to our blog already, I would encourage you to go to the blog on our website and subscribe. All you have to do is give us your email address. And anyway, we wrote a blog on this exact topic, the perfect thank you. So the way that we respond to this question is, from my personal standpoint, it's best to do both. So I say that email is awesome because I like it when a candidate sends me an email to say thank you for the interview within 24 hours. I just think in this day and age of everything being so digital, that shows that you're on top of your game, that you're enthusiastic about the job, that you have great follow-up and attention to detail, and that you want to move forward. I also love getting handwritten or typed whatever thank you notes in the mail. So of course the problem with the mail is that it can take, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever the U.S. postal system might be up to at that time. And so I like both. Most people today send emails. And I think, again, in this digital day and age, that is really, the way to go. I mean, if you're only going to do one or the other, then by all means you should send an email, because that's how people in the business world communicate today. But if you really want to show that extra step and that attention to detail, and again, just your level of enthusiasm, then do both. But today, I would not just rely on snail mail to send your thank you note, because your competition could be sending emails and the interviewer is thinking, gosh, I haven't gotten an email yet from Lana. She must not be as interested as the other candidates. And we've got just a couple more here. If you had a 3-person panel interview, do you send one thank you note to all 3, or are individual emails preferred? The answer to that question is individual emails are absolutely preferred. And so in the individual emails that you would send to each of the 3 people, each of the 3 people might have mentioned something in the interview that you can connect back to in your email. And with everything you do through the job search process, your resume, your cover letter, your thank you notes, you should try to be personalized and customized to that person or to that job. And so I would absolutely send an email to all 3 people, and I would do it at the same time. So don't send one email to one person and then wait a day and send it to the other person, because they're gonna debrief. If you have a panel interview, they are going to get together and compare notes on you. So send them all together, but send them separately is what I would do. Okay. All right. Here's another group panel interview. This is a good one too. Best way to handle group panel interviews. I always focus on the individual asking the question. Any other suggestions to make everyone feel part of the conversation during the interview? So if there's 3 people, for instance, and one person seems to be asking a lot of questions, and they're from HR, maybe you could engage the other people through your ability to ask some questions. So if one person's really been, you know, asking you the questions, then when you have a chance and say, you know, we've talked a lot about the area of human resources, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about the operations area. So then you turn to the other person and then you ask them a question to try and engage them in some dialogue. So it's definitely good. You want to have some, all three people are there for a reason, so you want to have some interaction with all of the people. So that's one way that you can do it. It's because in every interview situation, there will come a moment where they say, what questions do you have for us? And so that's an opportunity for you to try and engage the other people. And with that, I think we've been through all the questions, and it is 1 o'clock. And so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our session today. And I just want to thank everyone for your time and for your attention. And I've really enjoyed speaking about this topic. And like I said at the beginning, I hope you're all walking away with one little morsel that can help you achieve greater success. If you have questions after we hang up and we're done today, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is ljohnson@advancedresources.com, or you can also reach out to me via LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to do whatever we can do to help you. And so with that, thank you again for your time and your attention, and wish you the best of luck in your job search. Have a good day, everyone.